Behold the 1945 South Bend 9-inch Workshop Lathe, a rusted hulk of iron that still spins true after nearly 8 decades of relentless use. Compare that to a shiny new $800 mini-lathe from an online marketplace, dead in under a year thanks to plastic gears that crumble like dry clay. How did we go from crafting machines that could outlive us to building junk that barely survives the warranty? That's the question we're tearing into today. Let's rewind to 1934, the heart of the Great Depression, when the world was on its knees. America's industrial backbone was fractured, factories shuttered, and millions of hands sat idle, desperate for work. South Bend Lathe Works, a gritty outfit in Indiana, saw the crisis not as a death knell but as a call to arms. They knew that if the nation was to rebuild, it needed tools. Tools that didn't just work, but endured. Tools that could turn a garage tinkerer into a machinist overnight. Failure wasn't an option. It was a death sentence for a country already starving. Every lathe they built had to be a lifeline, a machine that could churn out parts for tractors, engines, and weapons, keeping the gears of survival turning. This wasn't about luxury or innovation for innovation's sake. It was about raw, unyielding necessity. If these machines broke, so did the fragile hope of recovery. Now let's get under the hood of this beast, because the South Bend 9-inch wasn't just another lathe. It was a masterclass in brute force engineering. Its genius lay in 3 unshakable pillars. First, the bed, crafted from seasoned cast iron, wasn't rushed out of a foundry and slapped together. No, this iron was left to age outdoors for months, exposed to the elements, letting nature itself relieve the internal stresses locked within the metal. The result? A foundation so stable it could sit through a century of pounding and still hold a perfect line. Unlike today's bargain bin lathes made with green, unseasoned iron that warps before you've even finished your first project. Second, the power delivery came through a leather flat belt drive, a rugged, no-nonsense system that soaked up motor vibrations like a sponge. This meant the cutting tool glided over the workpiece with surgical precision, leaving a mirror-smooth finish. Modern gear-driven lathes can't dream of this. Their rigid connections transmit every shudder and chatter straight into the metal, scarring the surface. And third, the back gear mechanism, a simple lever that engaged a set of beefy steel gears, slashing speed but multiplying torque 6-fold. With just a 1/4 horsepower motor, this lathe could chew through tough steel like butter, while today's mini-lathes, reliant on flimsy electronic speed controllers, lose all their grunt at low RPMs, stalling or stripping out when the going gets tough. Feel the weight of this design, hundreds of pounds of iron, the heat of friction on the belt, the grinding pressure of gears meshing with unapologetic force. This was engineering that laughed in the face of compromise. But let's not romanticize it too much. The men who ran these machines paid a price in blood and sweat. In the 1930s and 40s, operating a South Bend wasn't a desk job. It was a war of attrition. Machinists, often working in unventilated shops or freezing garages, stood for 12-hour shifts, muscles straining against the inertia of heavy chucks and handwheels. The heat from cutting metal could sear your skin if you got too close, and a moment's distraction might cost you a finger to the spinning jaws of the lathe. There were no fancy safety guards or automatic shutoffs. It was just you, the iron, and the unrelenting demand to keep producing. Many came away with scars, tinnitus from the constant whine of belts, or lungs full of metal dust. These weren't machines built for comfort. They were built for results, and the human toll was just part of the equation. Fast forward to today, and somehow, against all odds, these 1945 South Bends are still out there, taking abuse that would shatter their modern counterparts. I've seen them in barns caked in rust and grime, fired up after decades of neglect, and they still cut threads as clean as the day they left the factory. Now stack that up against a brand new mini-lathe, fresh off a cargo ship, packed with plastic gears and circuit boards that brick themselves with the first software update. One bad cut, one overload, and the whole thing is a paperweight, designed not to last but to be replaced. Why did we abandon the old ways? Simple: profit margins and planned obsolescence. It's cheaper to cast unseasoned iron, to slap in plastic components, to sell you a machine that dies just in time for you to buy the next model. They call it progress, but I call it a con. The South Bend was built to rebuild a nation. Today's junk is built to fill a landfill. So where does this leave the legacy of the South Bend 9-inch? Many of these machines are still out there, some in museums, some scrapped for pennies, but a surprising number still grinding away in small shops or hobbyist garages. They're a stubborn reminder of a time when good enough wasn't good enough, when durability wasn't a feature but a mandate. And as we drown in a sea of disposable tech, I can't help but wonder, what have we really gained by trading iron for plastic, endurance for expedience? Progress, they say, but at what cost? Let's dive deeper into the human cost of the South Bend 9-inch workshop lathe, because behind every roaring machine and perfectly cut piece of steel, there were men, ordinary, hard-working men, who bore the brunt of this industrial titan's demands. These weren't engineers in sterile labs or executives in boardrooms. These were machinists, often barely scraping by during the Great Depression, who saw this lathe not as a tool but as their ticket to survival. They worked in dimly lit workshops, basements, or drafty factory floors, where the air was thick with the acrid tang of cutting oil and the constant hum of spinning metal. Their hands, calloused and stained black with grease, wrestled with the raw power of this machine day after day, knowing full well that a single misstep could change their lives forever. Operating a South Bend in the 1930s and 40s was a physical ordeal that pushed the human body to its limits. 12-hour shifts were the norm, sometimes longer when wartime production quotas loomed. Machinists stood on concrete floors with no padding, their backs aching as they cranked heavy hand wheels to position the cutting tool or hauled stocky bars of steel into place. The sheer inertia of the lathe's components meant every adjustment was a test of strength. Turning a knob wasn't a flick of the wrist. It was a battle against hundreds of pounds of unyielding iron. Sweat poured down their faces in the summer, mixing with metal shavings that clung to their skin, while in winter their fingers numbed in unheated shops, making every precise movement a gamble. The heat radiating from a workpiece under heavy cutting could blister unprotected hands, and the relentless vibration of the machine traveled up their arms, leaving joints stiff and aching long after the shift ended. But the toll wasn't just physical exhaustion, it was the ever-present danger that hung over every operation. The South Bend didn't come with the safety bells and whistles we take for granted today. There were no emergency stop buttons, no protective shields to guard against a rogue piece of metal flying off at lethal speeds. The chuck, spinning at hundreds of revolutions per minute, was an open maw waiting to snag a sleeve or a stray hand. A moment of fatigue or distraction could mean losing a finger, or worse. Stories abounded of men caught in the belt drive, their bodies yanked into the machinery before anyone could react. Metal shavings, razor sharp and hot to the touch, littered the floor, embedding themselves in boots or slicing through skin if swept away carelessly. And the noise, oh, the noise, was a constant assault, a high-pitched whine of belts and gears that left many with ringing ears for life. Some machinists working in poorly ventilated spaces inhaled fine metal dust day after day, unaware of the slow damage it wrought on their lungs. Beyond the immediate risks, there was a psychological weight to the work. These men knew they couldn't afford to falter. In an era when jobs were scarce and families went hungry, every part they turned out on the South Bend was a lifeline, not just for them, but for the nation clawing its way out of economic ruin. A broken tool or a botched cut wasn't just a mistake. It could mean lost income, a reprimand, or even the loss of a job. They operated under pressure that modern workers can scarcely imagine, with the stakes of every shift feeling like life or death. And yet they kept at it, driven by grit and necessity, their bodies battered but their resolve unbroken. Many bore scars as badges of their trade, missing fingertips, burns, or crooked limbs from accidents that were just part of the job. They didn't complain, not because they didn't feel the pain, but because complaining wouldn't change the reality. The machine had to run, and they had to run it. It's worth pausing to consider the contrast with today's world, where we've sanitized so much of industrial work with safety protocols and automation. And that's not entirely a bad thing. Nobody should lose a hand to earn a paycheck. But there's something to be said for the raw, unfiltered connection these machinists had with their tools. They didn't just operate the South Bend. They wrestled with it, understood its every quirk through muscle memory, and respected its power in a way that no touchscreen interface can replicate. Modern mini-lathes, with their flimsy builds and over-engineered electronics, distance us from that visceral relationship. They're designed to be user-friendly, sure, but they also rob us of the deep, hard-earned knowledge that comes from mastering a beast of iron. Today's safety measures often feel like a double-edged sword, protecting us, yes, but also insulating us from the reality of what it means to build something enduring. This human cost, though, wasn't paid in vain. The machinists of the Depression era, through their sacrifice, helped forge a legacy that still stands. Their labor on machines like the South Bend didn't just produce parts, it produced resilience, a stubborn refusal to let hardship win. As we move forward in this story, we'll see how these lathes endured through decades, carrying the echoes of those sweat-soaked hands into an age that's all too quick to forget them. But for now, let's hold on to this truth. Every perfect cut, every flawless thread turned out by a 1945 South Bend was paid for not just in dollars, but in the very flesh and spirit of the men who stood behind it. Their struggle wasn't glamorous, but it was real, and it's a debt we owe to the past every time we marvel at what these old machines can still do. Let's turn our gaze to the test of time, where the 1945 South Bend 9-inch Workshop Lathe proves its mettle in a way that shames the throwaway tech of today. These machines, born in an era of desperation, weren't just built to work, they were built to defy oblivion. I've seen them in forgotten corners of rural workshops covered in a patina of rust, oil, and history. Yet when you flip the switch, they roar back to life as if the last 80 years were a mere nap. Their iron beds remain unbowed, holding tolerances so tight you'd swear they were calibrated yesterday. They've endured floods, neglect, and the clumsy hands of countless owners, yet they still turn out parts with a precision that modern hobbyists can only dream of. This isn't luck. It's the result of a design philosophy that saw durability as a moral imperative, not a marketing gimmick. Now let's hold that image up against the sad reality of a modern $800 mini-lathe, the kind you'd order online with free 2-day shipping. Out of the box, it gleams with promise, all sleek lines and digital readouts. But give it 6 months of real work, and it's a different story. The plastic gears inside, engineered for cost rather than strength, start to grind and shear under even moderate loads. Try to cut anything tougher than aluminum, and the electronic speed controller wheezes, losing torque until the motor stalls mid-pass. Worse, a random software update pushed through a cheap app can brick the whole system, turning your tool into an overpriced doorstop. I've heard of these lathes failing during critical jobs, leaving small business owners or hobbyists stranded, forced to shell out for another unit because repairs cost more than replacement. This isn't an accident. It's the cold calculus of planned obsolescence, where manufacturers bet on your frustration to drive the next sale. Contrast that with the South Bend, which has seen decades of abuse and still stands ready. There's a story of one unit, used in a small-town machine shop through the 50s and 60s, that churned out parts for everything from farm equipment to early aerospace components. It survived a shop fire, was rebuilt with salvaged parts, and kept running into the 90s before being retired, not because it failed, but because the owner passed away. Even now, machines like it are bought at auctions for thousands, not out of nostalgia, but because they can still do the job better than anything fresh off a container ship. The difference is stark. One is a tool you inherit, the other, a tool you landfill. So why did we stop building like this? The answer isn't pretty. After the post-war boom, the industrial mindset shifted from endurance to expedience. Corporations realized they could make more money by cutting corners, using unseasoned iron that warps under stress, swapping steel for plastic, and designing products to fail just past the warranty. It's not about making a better lathe, it's about making a cheaper one that forces you back to the checkout. Safety regulations, often framed as progress, sometimes became a smokescreen for what I call safety theater, rules that pad profit margins by mandating disposable designs over robust ones. And let's not forget the cultural shift. We've been trained to value convenience over craftsmanship, to see a tool as a temporary accessory rather than a lifelong partner. The South Bend was forged in a time when breaking down wasn't an option. Today, breaking down is the business model. This divergence isn't just about lathes. It's a microcosm of how we've lost our way with technology as a whole. Look at modern farm tractors, bricked by proprietary software locks when a sensor glitches, leaving farmers stranded mid-harvest, while a 1940s tractor, all mechanical guts and no digital nonsense, would still chug along. Or consider household appliances. A 1950s refrigerator might run for 40 years, while today's smart fridge dies in 5, felled by a failed circuit board you can't even source. We've traded resilience for bells and whistles, and every time one of these modern marvels fails, I can't help but hear the ghost of those old machinists laughing bitterly from the past. They knew how to build for forever. We've mastered building for the next quarter's earnings report. The test of time isn't just a technical comparison, it's a moral one. The South Bend stands as a rebuke to our disposable age, a reminder that we once valued substance over surface. It endured because it had to, because the people who built and used it couldn't afford to fail. Today, failure is baked into the blueprint, and we're the ones paying the price, both in dollars and in the slow erosion of what it means to create something lasting. As we move toward the legacy of this machine, let's carry this lesson with us. Endurance isn't just a feature of iron and steel, it's a choice, one we've forgotten how to make. Now, as we come to the end of this journey with the 1945 South Bend 9-inch Workshop Lathe, let's reflect on its legacy, a legacy that stands as both a monument and a quiet accusation in our throwaway world. Where are these machines now, after nearly 8 decades of service? Some have been relegated to the scrap heap, their iron melted down for pennies, a tragic end for tools that once rebuilt a nation. Others sit proudly in museums, polished and static, admired as relics of a bygone era, but divorced from the gritty purpose they were born for. Yet remarkably, many are still out there in the wild, tucked away in small-town workshops, garages, and barns, still spinning, still cutting, still defying the passage of time. These survivors are often snatched up by enthusiasts or machinists who know their worth, paying thousands not for a collector's item, but for a workhorse that can outlast anything built today. They are living proof that old iron isn't just a nostalgic phrase. It's a testament to an ethos we've abandoned. I've come across stories of these lathes being passed down through generations, from grandfathers to sons to grandsons, each owner adding their own layer of wear and history. There's one account of a South Bend in a Wisconsin garage, bought in 1946 by a returning GI, used to repair everything from car parts to custom rifle barrels over the decades. It's still there, surrounded by modern tools that have come and gone. Its bed is straight as ever, ready for the next job. These machines aren't just tools, they're heirlooms, carrying the weight of countless hands that gripped their controls, the echoes of late-night shifts and desperate deadlines. They embody a stubborn refusal to be discarded, a quality that feels almost alien in an age where we're conditioned to upgrade every 2 years. But this legacy isn't just about where the South Bend lathes are now. It's about what they represent in contrast to our current trajectory. They were forged in a time when progress meant building something indestructible, something that could carry a society through its darkest hours. Today, progress seems to mean building something shiny that's obsolete, before the box is unpacked. The South Bend reminds us of a world where durability was a virtue, not a liability to a balance sheet. It challenges us to ask why we've accepted a reality where a tool's lifespan is measured in months rather than lifetimes. Was it worth trading the enduring strength of seasoned iron for the fleeting convenience of plastic and pixels? Have we gained efficiency only to lose resilience? This isn't mere sentimentality. It's a reckoning with the cost of what we've dubbed advancement. Every time a modern mini-lathe grinds to a halt, its plastic innards shattered, or a smart device locks up because of a forced update, we're paying for the decision to prioritize profit over permanence. The machinists of the 1930s and 40s, with their scarred hands and weary backs, understood a truth we've forgotten. A tool isn't just a means to an end. It's a pact between maker and user, a promise that it will hold up under pressure. The South Bend kept that promise through depressions, wars, and decades of hard use. Our modern equivalents break that pact as a matter of design, leaving us stranded in a cycle of consumption and waste. So as we close this story, let's linger on a final thought. The South Bend 9-inch Workshop Lathe, whether it's humming in a dusty shop or sitting silent in a museum, isn't just a piece of machinery. It's a mirror held up to our choices. It shows us what we were once capable of, the heights of craftsmanship and grit we reached when survival demanded it. And it asks us, with every turn of its worn gears, what we've sacrificed in the name of progress. Perhaps the real cost isn't in the dollars we spend replacing flimsy tools, but in the loss of a mindset that valued endurance above all else. Maybe it's time we looked back, not with nostalgia, but with resolve, to remember how to build and live for the long haul.